Hello, sports fans. This is Wilson. So, there's not much Lakers stuff to talk about this week, pretty much at all. The only thing is that Shams came out and reported the Lakers will open the season, the NBA season, on opening day, which will be October 21st, against the Warriors. I think it's going to be in Los Angeles. I'm not sure. But the main thing is that it's going to be on NBC, and I did think that I think that's pretty cool that they're gonna jump right back into the NBA on NBC. Yeah, the game is going to be at LA. Um, uh, I guess it'll be the night game after Rockets and Thunder. Yeah, the first game will be Rockets at Thunder. OKC going to lift their banner and get their rings. And then it'll be Warriors and Lakers in LA for the nightcap. Once again, on NBC. So right back to the for this new generation of fans, who didn't get to experience the greatness of the NBA on NBC, uh, which I think was from '91 through 2002. Uh, Man, it was absolutely amazing to live through that. Um, and I'm glad it's back. Hopefully, it'll restore some of the vibes from back then because the NBA needs it. But what I really wanted to get into though was it's gonna be a more so a football episode um, because it's Saturday morning right now. Normally I don't record on the weekends, but why the hell not, right? Yesterday on Friday, the big story was, Shedeur Sanders making his preseason debut in the NFL for the Cleveland Browns. He started uh, and played. I think he played end of the second half, right? And he shined. He was 14 of 23, 138 yards, and threw two touchdown passes, and did the fake watch celebration, and it was the biggest. It made a lot of buzz on social media, and Coach Prime was ecstatic. LeBron James was ecstatic. Shedeur played a little less than 3 quarters. I'm reading now from the ESPN write-up by Daniel Oyefusi. He also uh, rushed 4 times for 19 yards. It says Sanders was on the field for 45 plays before Browns coach Kevin Stefanski had said the rookie would get about 50 snaps before Tyler Huntley, who was signed Tuesday after multiple quarterback injuries, entered the game with 22 remaining in the fourth quarter. All right, so um, obviously, as you can tell, I didn't actually watch the game, but I didn't need to, and I did see some of the highlights. Shedeur Sanders is uh, also uh, write-up ads. The Browns took the majority of their starters Friday night, so Sanders took the field with a group of second and third string players he had practiced with throughout training camp. The Panthers played most of their starters for about 2 drives. So, Shedeur Sanders is a guy. I mean, this could be one of those situations where, you know, as much as the NFL is like college football and the NFL are two different games, right? Um, as much, if not more, than any other sport, uh, the difference between the college game and the program and the pro game is just it's just a night and day difference, you know. And I mean, we see all the time. You know, you have players who are great in in college who don't pan out in the pros. The same thing happens in the NBA and in other sports. You know, that's just how it is. But I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that there are times when I mean, Shedeur Sanders is someone who he performed in college. You know, he was at Jackson State at first, had a great season for them. That was deep. I think they're Division One, but they're like they're not football subdivision, however you say it. And then they're FCS, right? Um, and then uh, he goes to Colorado, and he turned that program around. I think they won 8 or 9 games last year. You know, so and he was like he's one of the most accurate, if not the most accurate quarterback in college football. And I think sometimes, man, it's as simple as like the, and I know, I guess, why did he fall to the fifth round exactly? I don't think we'll ever actually know. Um, uh, Obviously, as I was saying, um, the NFL they look for more than just your whatever your college statistics are, because as I said, it's a different game, and you need a particular skill set to perform in the NFL. But sometimes it's simple, and if you perform in college, um, maybe that's the best indicator of how you will perform in the NFL and how you will handle the NFL. Um, of course, it's just one preseason game, and it really doesn't mean anything. But it was a good start, and it would be great if he's good, because if he's good, it's a Sanders name. It's Deion's son, and even though Deion is still at Colorado, of course he's gonna always have something to say about it. And it's just a great storyline. Not that the NFL really needs it, because the NFL is just it's so big it doesn't really matter. But it's almost like a Tim. I don't want to say. I mean, Tim Tebow is he was a different case as a player. Excuse me. But um, as far as the storyline goes, when you have a player who is just like you know, a Johnny Football, think about how much more fun it would be right now if Johnny Football was, still, uh, still in the league. And Johnny Football's got to be in his 30s, his 30s now, like. And well, if you think about it, Johnny Football had a nice, like, 10-year run as a starting quarterback in the NFL. How fun that would have been, and we all remember Tebow Mania, So it's just fun with people who were not just, um, great players in college, but celebrities in college. When they shine in the NFL, you know, I always like it when the best, not just the best, but like the most famous college players end up being meaningful NFL players, which it's something. I mean, in football, there's so many players, and there's so many teams in college football, and they come from so many different places. That a lot of the time the players who are play for the big programs and play in the big games, and they're in the spotlight. A lot of the times they're not the guys who end up being, uh, the household names in the NFL. So if Shedeur ends up being good, like I said, man, that would just be great uh, for the league. But yeah, a good start for him. Like I said, it doesn't really mean anything yet if we're being, honest and realistic. But I mean, he just seemed poised. He seemed like he seemed like he belonged. And I think that's the most important thing. Um, so hopefully he just keeps progressing, and you know, and it's just up from here for Shedeur. They had a screenshot from the sideline of Flacco and Deshaun and Dylan Gabriel, and only Flacco as Shedeur was balling. Flacco's grinning ear to ear, and the other two are just kind of like, uh, but then people were saying, well, Flacco's like, hey man, maybe I'll get to stand on the sideline and collect my last paycheck this year. That would be great for him, huh? You know. So we just, I'm trying to think of if there's ever been a quarter. It's weird because um, I remember when Matt Leinart had his first NFL start against the Bears on Monday Night Football. Obviously, Matt Leinart, one of the greatest college quarterbacks of all time, and he went out there. He balled out. That was that Bears team that made the Super Bowl, and they were undefeated at that point. And that was the game where Denny Green, rest in peace, after the game, he goes, "The Bears are who we thought they are. The Bears are who we thought they are, and we let them off the hook." And Matt went out there, man. He balled out in that game. And I remember Bill Simmons talking, speaking after the game and saying that, because like I said, bro, what the NFL does, the NFL, you can be like the best player in college football, or one of the best, and the NFL will go and they will pick you apart. And that's how Matt Leinart fell to 10th in the draft. He would have been the first pick after his junior year when he won the Heisman and won the national championship. And the next year he comes back and they spent a year picking his game apart, and he falls to 10th. And after that first start, Monday Night Football, Simmons goes, he basically makes a point of like, he basically criticized the NFL for, taking everything else into account more than taking all the different variables, all the different measurements and stuff like that, more into account than the actual on-field performance, right? Now, of course, the problem with that is that Matt ended up, basically, burning out. I mean, it wasn't really a burnout. I always blamed Ken Wisenhunt because they fired Denny Green after that season, and then Ken Wisenhunt comes in, and he was just being a hard ass on Matt. Matt wasn't this guy. Matt's the guy who comes from, he came from USC. He's playing for Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll's not hard on his players, right? And here comes Ken Wisenhunt being this hard ass and, just giving Matt a hard time. And Matt, I think if Matt had a coach come in who was more supportive, Matt would have maybe had a long career start in the NFL. And I know Matt always blamed Ken Wisenhunt for kind of ruining his career. But, and yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see how it goes with Shedeur, though. Because that was was what happened last night more of a Matt Leinart on Monday Night Football type deal, where it ends up being fool's gold basically, or is it a sign of things to come? So I'm really trying to think of a situation where it's like a player who basically was just a natural fit for the NFL game. I think it would probably feel like that just. I mean, when I say I mean a player who was at a bigger program, right? It happens all the time where you have guys who went to smaller schools and they get to the league and it's like, bro, their game they just fit right in. They slot right in, right? like well, I mean, this is not a good example, but in reverse. Okay, I guess this is an example of what I mean. Like so Shedeur fell in the draft, uh, but he seemed to just fit right in last night, right? Now, obviously, disregard what I said about the small school, because the guy I'm going to talk about, so St. Brown, like Matt Leinart, went to, I'm talking about St. Brown. He went to Modern Day, which is a huge, high school out here in California, power program. And then he goes to USC, of course, one of the, biggest programs in the history of college football. And he had a really good career at USC, but then he fell to the fourth round. But he's been like an all-pro on the first team like twice, like 2 years in a row. And the Lions have become a contender with him on the team, right? But he's the type of guy who, I know it's a different position because it's a receiver, but he's a guy who his game is just a natural fit for the NFL, you know. Whereas you have guys like back when I was younger, Dwayne Jarrett, who played on those USC teams with Liner, and it just didn't work out for different reasons. So there's actually, I think, more cases where you have players who were kind of under the radar in college who come and fit right in um, than guys from the big programs who were in big spots. Unless they're just like super duper star, talents. That's different. Like some of these kids who went to Alabama and schools like that. But programs like that, they were dominant. Like all the kids that came out of Miami back in the day, right? Uh, you know, um, I think it happens. It seems to happen like that more often, where it'll be a kid from who was like unheralded coming out of the draft than someone who everybody already knew. And everybody, spent years talking about him in college and then talking about him in the pre-draft process. It's usually the guys who are more heralded, regardless of where they went to school, that will kind of just come and just fit right in. But Shedeur is someone who was under a microscope at Colorado. They were a big deal. Probably the biggest story in college football in 2 years at Colorado, and even at Jackson State it was a big deal. And so he was all over the place in college, all in the headlines. Him and his dad and Travis. But then he fell to the fifth round. But last night he looked like somebody who belonged. All right, I think I've meandered on enough about Shedeur now. Let me transition, because Jimbo Fisher was on this podcast with I think it was a former player of his. I don't know, Florida State. I had on Florida State. I don't know who it was. Probably somebody I should know. But he was on the podcast, and he was talking about how his Florida State team that won the Natty in 2013, that they belong, like they had like the most dominant season in the history of college football. And his argument was, well, they averaged 51.6 points a game and only gave up 12.1. They went 14-0. And I remember that team, and I was a team, but James was a redshirt freshman. He won the Heisman. They had Devontae Freeman at running back, who was a two-time Pro Bowler. And then they had Kelvin Benjamin, who was, a first-round pick, and who early on, first year, he had a 1,000-yard season as a rookie, but captain. Second year, they made the Super Bowl, and then he fell off after that. But he could ball. And that was a dominant team. I remember how dominant that team was, and see what happened with them was they didn't stick to landing, right? So in the national championship game, they beat Auburn 34-31. they had to win it at the very end. And I think that's why people don't remember them being as dominant as they actually were. Now, if you compare them to the teams of the last 25 years that I watched, the best teams I saw, so that would be obviously 2001 Miami with all the guys that they had, man. I don't need to say it, but Ken Dorsey was the quarterback, and he was like Matt Leinart before Matt Leinart. But in the NFL, he didn't, he wasn't really an NFL talent. But everybody else was. They had Frank Gore, they had Willis McGahee, they had Clinton Portis. Portis was the starter that year, and you had Gore and McGahee behind him. They had Jeremy Shockey and Kellen Winslow. The offensive line was stacked. The defense had Ed Reed and Sean Taylor. You know, it was just a spectacular assortment of talent. Now, when you get around to this, the USC, Pete Carroll. So 2004, that was when USC ran. They were, I think, they were to this day the only team to go wire to wire number one. They went 13-0, scored 38.2 points a game, averaged 13. Only gave up 13 points a game. But really, I think that the 2005 team I think was more dominant, really. But they lost. Once again, they lost to Texas in the title game, and that was a team that had the chance to three-peat. But they averaged 49.2 points a game this year, but they gave up 22.5. That's the thing about that is, I remember watching that team, and basically that was a team that, they were so good offensively that they would kind of come out and basically just lollygag and just rely on how good they were offensively. When your offense is that good, your defense can kind of relax a little, right? So the defensive talent was there, but they just, they were so good and so talented and so dominant, just overall, that that I think the defense kind of took it easy. But really, I think they were better than the 2014, but it didn't matter because they lost. They lost to Texas, and then in 2008, that team also. That was a team that they went 12-1, like the 2005 team. The loss being to Oregon State, but that was a team that averaged 36.9 points a game, only gave up 9.2 points a game, and only gave up 10 touchdowns all season, right? And I think I remember Pete Carroll saying, before the season started, that he thought that 2018 might have been like their best team from top to bottom. By 2008, this is the year when you have, Clay Matthews and Brian Cushing and Malaluga at linebacker. I mean, that's one of the best linebacker cores at the time that you could ever see, in college. Clay Matthews went on to have, borderline damn near, a Hall of Fame career with the Packers. Won the Super Bowl, made like 6 or 7 Pro Bowls. So he had a hell of a career. Cushing was the Defensive Rookie of the Year. Malaluga was a beast. That was just a vicious USC team. But again, that one game that they lost, ended up knocking them out of the, title game down the line. And so, they don't get to be in this conversation. And then you have 2018 Clemson. They went 15-0. Scored 44.3 points a game and only gave up 13.1. That was the year that they beat when Trevor Lawrence was a freshman, and they beat Alabama in the national championship game. Score was I think it was 44-16 or 44-18, one of the two. That was a dominant team. And then you have next year 2019 LSU. Went 15-0, 48.9 points a game scored to 21.9 given up. Of course, it's a team with Joe Burrow, with Jamar Chase, with Justin Jefferson, and I mean, just that's like it's like the USC team that had Leonard, Bush, White, uh, uh, Dwayne Jarrett, and Steve Smith. But if they all went on to be like, if Leonard, Smith, and Jarrett all went on to be like first team All Pro players in the league, still putting up crazy numbers, you know. They also the LSU team also had Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's been he started off okay, but um, he kind of just fell off in Kansas City, you know. But yeah, they were a dominant team. I don't know their defense. I just wanted that USC team that we with Bush and Leonard and them and that 2005 team. I don't know. I never really saw a. I don't know. I don't know if there's a defense that would. They never were. They really struggled to score against anybody that season. You know, I mean, those guys. But that was junior year for all the skill players. Or besides Jarrett. Jarrett was a sophomore, and then Matt is a senior. I mean, they were just fully formed, you know, and just completely just rocking and rolling. Uh, and they were so good in the run game with Bush and White, you know. Uh, Somewhere Liner, what he did, Bush and White both going for over 1,000 yards, having crazy seasons. Jared over 1,000 yards, 14, 15 touchdowns, whatever it was. Steve Smith, I think he just missed 1,000 yards. So that was a crazy good USC offense. Uh, Maybe even better than the LSU team because, Edwards-Helaire, he was a good player in college. He wasn't a Reggie Bush, you know. So I just wonder, though, if that LSU team, if they played a 2001 Miami, as good as that Miami defense was, is it possible that was that LSU offense just so good with Burrow, White, with Burrow and Jefferson and Chase that there was no defense in the history of college football that could have slowed them down. It's possible. But yeah, with that FSU team, uh, that's their problem is that uh, their problem is that like I said, they didn't stick the landing. You gotta go all the way, bro. On Miami, they crushed. They crushed Nebraska. 04 USC, they crushed a really good Oklahoma team. 55-19, I think it was. 55-21, maybe. One of the two. LSU. I don't remember who. Oh, yeah, they beat Clemson. They beat the defending champions in 2019. It was competitive, but LSU was in control. LSU was clearly the better team, and they handled them. Clemson, they crushed Alabama. So all those teams, they stuck the landing. They went all the way with it. Whereas FSU got in the end against an Auburn team that they had to, they had to win on the last drive of the game. So in a certain sense, I think that they didn't. I don't know. When they kind of get, if they're not remembered how they should be, that's why. But they had a dominant season. There's no question. But that's the reason that they're not in the conversation with 01 Miami, 04 USC, 19 LSU, even 18 Clemson, I think doesn't really get to. The 2019 LSU coming right on the heels of them, it kind of took some of the steam out of the year that Clemson had, especially with LSU beating them. But, yeah, so that's it. It's over. Before I get out of here, just a reminder to hit that subscribe button next to the Complete Podcast Network and to follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at TC Pod Network. You can also send feedback and mailback questions to Complete Lakers Podcast at gmail.com. I am out.